Good editing.
Okay, yeah, you're right. All right. So hi everyone, good evening. Thank you so much for being here today. So for those of you who are here for the first time, which I think maybe many of you, this is a Products That Count event, and Products That Count is a community of product managers and innovators. We started in the San Francisco Bay Area, and since then we've expanded to London and also New York. So we run a monthly speaker series on what makes a great product. And every month we call a great speaker to an amazing venue to give a talk about what makes a great product. And what's really unique about our events is that we ask the speaker to share something that they may not have shared with others before. So we always make our talk very unique. And I will let Paul share with you what that is. Before I go on to the speech for today, I just want to say a massive thank you to our global sponsors, Pragmatic Marketing. For the aspiring product managers in the room, Pragmatic Marketing offers a wonderful set of courses for product managers, and you could just go on their website, pragmaticmarketing.com, and find out more if you're interested. I also want to say a big thank you to TechSpace for hosting us here today. So TechSpace is basically, they host office spaces for startups and scale-ups, and that's where we are now. So if you like this place, if you're interested in recommending it to anyone or interested yourself, just reach out to Yasmin, who's at the back over there. And she's also been one of our volunteers here today, and she's been super helpful. So just reach out to her. I'm sure many of you have already spoken to her today. And yeah, that's it. So on to today's talk. So today we're going to hear from Paul Hammond, who is the European Product Director of eBay. And he's here to give a talk on what really makes a strong team. And this is something that I think we can all relate to, because we all work with people in the workplace and in different situations. And he's here to share with you how different aspects of whether it's organizational vocabulary or other elements of being just agile can affect, working in a team. I'm not going to give any more away because I'm going to let Paul do that for himself. So please join me in giving a very warm round of applause to Paul.
I'm just going to try and figure out how important this microphone is, because I can project if that's okay, and I'd rather not be tied down. Is it okay if I do that? Are we okay from a recording perspective? Good, alright. If we could just get rid of the really funky music, that'd be awesome. Right. So, I'm going to talk about words today. There's a lot more to it than just words, obviously, but I want to focus specifically on the words we use every day and why they matter. And in particular, I'll focus on agile transformations, agility. But I want to focus very much on being thoughtful about our vocabulary. It's really distracting. Anyone could follow me? So we all communicate every day. We all use our words. And communications really are how we congregate, how we affiliate with each other, how we come together, how we align or don't align. So I'm going to spend a bunch of time talking about those words. I couldn't find a hands graphic, so we're going to do show of thumbs. So who here has been involved with a team that is agile or is trying to be agile or is in part of a transformation, an agile transformation, those kinds of things. So knows what agile is, has come in contact with it. Thumbs up. Excellent. And, okay. So some folks that haven't, so I'll probably have to bear that in mind as we go along. If I say anything that you need a bit more explanation for, just wait. Thumbs down if you've been part of one that didn't go very well or struggles on a daily basis. Okay. That's common. That's okay. That's all right. So what I'm going to talk about is going to seem simple. Really simple, right? It's common sense, actually. My experience says that despite that, it's something that's a problem every single day. The more people involved in an agile project or an agile transformation, the harder it becomes, actually. And, you know, it's just words. It should be simple, right? That's the dictionary definition of the word simple. There are 29 possible definitions of the word simple. When I said it should be simple, everyone in the room picked one or more of those 29 for their definition. What I meant may or may not have been what you understood. I meant this, easy to understand, maybe a simple math, a simple tooling, that kind of thing. But I didn't mean one of the other definitions, which was unsophisticated, although maybe I am. Naive, definitely. Credulous. So just a really simple example. Oh no, it's not simple. It's too much. A really straightforward example, if you like, of how the words can trip you up. So let's talk about Agile for a second. So if, for the folks that hadn't put their thumbs up, when I talk about agility, I'm talking about a way of working that you might choose as an organization that is going to help you, in theory, ship better products more frequently to your customers and generate more value for your business. So when you look at the dictionary definitions of Agile, quick and well coordinated, active or lively, marked by the ability to think quickly, mentally acute, mentally aware. Think about that dog right now in that lovely bandana. He had to calculate the trajectory of the frisbee, run across the park, leap what looks to be about 2 feet in the air, and catch that frisbee. I'd say he's agile. Excellent. So we want this, right? Of course. Why wouldn't you want this? Because the alternative is this. I can't get past the cat. Inactive, lazy, lethargic, rigid, slow, sluggish. You said to your VP, we're going to start doing lethargic software development or lethargic product development. He's not going to be interested. Everyone here came out to a session called Products That Count. We want to build products that count. He probably wouldn't have come to slow, rigid, lazy, brittle products that probably won't count. I mean, nobody wants that. With me so far? Makes sense, right? All right, my favorite question. Are you agile? I was at a board meeting a while back, and one of the other board members was at the lunch table telling me how they had met one of the very senior leaders of, I think it was one of the ride-sharing teams, and was telling me about the conversation, and she said, so I asked him, are you agile? And I went, wait, back up. When you asked that question, what did you mean? She went, I don't know, well, agile. This thing we're here for this board meeting for, agile. So we spent about an hour drilling into, what do you mean by, are you agile, when you ask that question? It was a great conversation. It was part of what led me to this presentation in many respects. And of course the response that she got from the other person was, yeah, of course, totally agile. And what he meant by agile probably wasn't what she meant. They were both happy. And they went their separate ways. So I'm Paul. Just as a bit of background, I am a long-time corporate leader from Microsoft for 15 years, through eBay for the last 18 months. Spent a lot of time thinking about how to ship great products, but also help teams be more effective and adopt change. And I'm also a board member for Agile Alliance, which, if you've never heard of that, is a not-for-profit organization that looks at the agility across companies, individuals, communities, and tries to further the subject of agility in general. We have a major conference every year in August in the US for 2,500 delegates, that kind of thing. It's a pretty cool place to be. And I've been doing Agile now for 12, 15 years, and so what you're seeing today represents lots of the things I've come to realize over time, and hopefully it will be useful and gets you further than I did in the 15 years it took me to get this far. So let's talk about typical Agile transformations. What does it turn into? When someone says, we're going to be agile or we're going to do agile. Be and do, very different things. We'll come back to those words. But when an exec says, yay, agility, what tends to happen? We create product backlogs. We appoint product owners. If any of these terms don't mean anything to people in the room, I think I'm underscoring my point. We have Scrum Masters, maybe Agile leads. Some folks don't like Scrum Masters. And we create weekly cycles. And we look at burn down charts to see if we're doing okay. And sometimes we do burn ups just to be different. And sometimes we do cumulative flow diagrams because they help us with historical data. And we do sprints, maybe. We call them sprints when we think about our weekly cycles. Of course, we have sprints. We need to have sprint backlogs, don't we? Yeah? And we have team members. No longer do we have developers or testers or those things. We just have people that are in the team members. And we use Kanban boards. Maybe we use Jira for that. Jira is a product that helps you do your reports. And we have these things called user stories. We don't do requirements anymore. We do user stories. And then we estimate those user stories using not hours and tasks, but relative estimates. And we practice collective code ownership. And we do retrospectives, and we time box those retrospectives because we haven't got lots of time. We have to make sure it's out. This is a long list, by the way. We go for a while. So then we use Trello and Jira's down, or because we don't like Jira, or because we're that team over in the side there that we think no one's looking at. And we do self-organization. Yeah, we'll talk about self-organization later. We get customer feedback. We might adopt Scrum. And then when we get big, or if we're already big, we might take on SAFe, which is a scaling framework for Scrum. Oh no, sorry, we're going to do discipline. No, we're going to make our own. We're going to scale that instead. Oh, and we do TDD. Now I'm using acronyms now on purpose, because half the room probably doesn't even know what that stands for. And that's okay. But it means test-driven development. And that's an engineer's thing. It's not a product thing. And we do pairing. That means sitting together and working on the same thing at half the speed, apparently, according to the senior execs. And we do CI and CD. And then, because we've done all those things, we update our CVs. And we do automation. And we have minimum viable products. Those product folks in the room probably know what the MVP moniker means. And then we think about whole team. This concept of whole team. That's capital W, capital T for a reason. And we have information radars. And we make working software, and we think about doing things at the last responsible moment. We have a definition of done. And then when we have one of those, we realize that we probably wanted a definition of ready before we can get anywhere near the definition of done. And we don't mean done, we mean done. And I've actually heard, not a lie, somebody say done. In which case I wasn't sure if they were trying to sing a theme tune or actually state some statement they wanted to be. And we do lean, and we do fast feedback, and we fail fast, and then we get bingo on agile buzzwords. Now, I'm, of course, being ridiculous. Somewhat. But I saw nods in the room. Because when you start to do agile, I'm going to say do, not be, this is what happens to your organization. Because you get a coach. And they come in and they talk about all of these practices that will change, that will make you better. And they're all actually valuable, of course. They wouldn't exist if they weren't. So many people wouldn't do them if they weren't. Well, wow, that's a lot of change, isn't it? If I just said to you, hey, you're the same person, basically doing the same job, but you need to take care of those 6 previous slides. There were 6. That would be scary, wouldn't it? And my experience says that one of the biggest challenges with agile transformations particularly, but change in general, is that we go too quickly to the how. How do we think about this? How do we do this? And not the why, and what's important. And we don't spend enough time on the foundational pieces that help us be successful. Does that make sense? Cool. So what I'm saying is that agility is an ecosystem that is made up of these 3 component parts. There are the practices, but there are also values and principles and the climate or the culture that you find yourself in. They are all important. They're all part of the change. And what I'm going to talk about for the rest of this session and use your feedback as an audience to help me navigate some words in a little while, is that if we focus in on the values and principles, and to some extent the culture, the practices will work so much better and stick so much better. Okay? That makes sense? There's a great book called Tribal Leadership. Has anyone read it? No? Okay, so it's a book that is actually the results of a huge amount of research across lots and lots of organizations. And it tries to define layers of tribe success. And a tribe is defined as between, I think it's 15 and 150 people. And so you'll see tribes everywhere that you go in your daily life. You'll see them at home, you'll see them in your external organizations and your volunteerism. You'll see them in work. If you have a 3,000 person company, you've probably got a lot of tribes. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in there around how you know which level you're at. But the point that really resonated with me when I read the book was, he said, change the language of the tribe and you change the tribe itself. And the whole transgression from one state to another was predicated on how the teams talk to each other and the words that they used. And so that's backed by tons and tons and tons of research. It's a really interesting read. And so I highly recommend it. Tribal Leadership. So, I feel like we should talk about some examples. So I gave you one at the beginning, simple. Talked about Agile. I worked with a team in America that were doing effectively their first sprint. And one of the rules of doing sprints in Agile is that you get together at the beginning and you make a plan for a period of time. It's not very long. Some people it's 30 days, as long as 30 days. For some people it can be a week. Some teams get it even shorter. So it was a 30-day sprint with this team. And they went off and they did the work they needed to do. And we came back at the end, and one of the things that happens is a demonstration of the software that you built. And the product owner opened the conversation and he said, I think we had a great first sprint. Those things we planned to do, we were pretty done-ish. And I laughed silently to myself. That's fabulous. What he meant was, we didn't get anywhere close. We opened every single task and tried to do them all in parallel, and none of them were complete. And therefore, in fact, they were 0% done because they couldn't change anything. One of the things we were asking for was, be done with something. At the end of that time, be done with something. Have some value for the customer. Okay? So just a fun example, but it's the kind of language that you need to look out for when you're working with a team. Self-organizing teams. So, there are some people here that never really thought about Agile too much. There's some people here that have done some Agile transformations. Doesn't matter. Shout out. What do we think that means? What is a self-organizing team? Let's get some energy in the room now that isn't me. And if you need a microphone, just yell and we'll figure that out. Just name an attribute of a self-organizing team.
Make their own decisions.
So they make their own decisions. Okay, good. What else? Flexible. What did you say? Flexible skill sets. What else?
Appoint their own leaders.
They appoint their own leaders. Yes, very good. And actually, the Tribal Leadership book has a whole section on how leaders arise within tribes, which is very interesting. What else?
You all have similarities.
The team members, do you mean? Say more what you mean. So the point was they all have similarities.
Because it's self-organized, so pretty sure they're organized together and they all have chemistry, so they'll understand.
Okay, yes, so you might find teams coming together who resonate with each other or have some commonality between them. That's true, yes.
I think sometimes a self-organizing team knows how to leverage each other's strengths and weaknesses.
Okay,
so there may be different personalities, but each person in the team can leverage what their strengths are.
Yep, strengths and weaknesses, and the sum of the parts is greater. I can never remember that cliche, but they're all good, right, when they come together. What else?
They also actually know what the team is aiming for, so that's why they actually know how to organise themselves, because they know exactly what the task is as well.
Yes, so they're clear on their task, they know what their goal is. Excellent. All good stuff. I wonder if I ask the same question of a different room of people, if I get the same answers. And the answer is probably no. And so what this tells me is, we need to spend time talking about what it means. My two favorite quotes about self-organizing teams, one, you will hear lots of times, is, you can't tell us what to do, we're self-organizing. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. And if we can talk about what self-organization means for a second, you realize you don't just exist in this bubble off to one side and you can just do what you want. Because the organization still needs to make money, and we still need to know what you're doing. So actually, you can't. But that's one of my favorites, a very early Agile team that is trying to live and breathe some of the 6 slides I've worked from before. We'll bring that one out. My favorite one ever was talking to a manager at an Agile conference. And he said to me, I told my team to self-organize, and they did it wrong. Fabulous. We spent about 90 minutes talking about that. Okay, so how? What was it that they did? And talking through why actually the problem wasn't anything to do with self-organization, and everything to do with I'll call them constraints, but basically the edges of where they were allowed to be self-organizing. Right? And it was one of those things where the guy just said, be self-organizing. Nothing more. It's tricky. These words are easy. They're simple. And yet, we find ourselves in a bit of a challenge. All right, more from you guys now. So, when the Scrum framework first came out, the word commitment was used for the results of the thing that they would plan. So, in the Scrum framework, you come together on day one, you talk about everything that you could be doing, and then you make a commitment to what you're going to deliver at the end of your time frame, so the week or however. Okay? About maybe 2 years ago, I guess, the Scrum guy got updated, and they changed the word commitment to forecast. Very deliberately, they did it for a reason. So that's why it's on this slide. It's because one popular Agile framework decided, first on one word, and then to switch to another word. So let's talk for a second about a group of people coming together and making a forecast, specifically the forecast version of this word. What are the good things you can think of about using the word forecast? And what are the bad things you can think of about using the word forecast to describe something that a team is coming together to work on?
Forecasts can be wrong.
Forecasts can be wrong, for sure.
Commitment's more certainty.
Commitment implies certainty. Right. Good. Let's focus mostly on forecasts, so pros and cons. Let's not contrast them just yet, but good point. So forecast. What can go well when there's a forecast?
It helps you plan for the future.
Say more.
When you forecast what may happen, let's say you're doing business forecasting, you're planning for contingency options, which can be good. It brings a team together to plan for what could go wrong and what could go well. I'm going to just, if you don't mind, just drill into that just for a second. So you said the word forecast and then you said the word plan. Yeah.
I don't think they match because a forecast to me, the weather forecast.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you disappointed when it rains and it said it wouldn't? Or actually, are you disappointed when it's sunny when it should be raining?
It's a fair point.
Not really, because actually, you know what? With a forecast, it could be different.
Yeah.
That's okay. The definition of the word forecast says, it was just the best guess at the time.
It's just a prediction of the future. It may or may not come true.
Okay, what else? What are the good things about forecasts and what bad things about forecasts? You could be well under. You could think you're going to do one thing and do 10. And that could be seen as being bad from you guys don't know what you're doing. You said you were going to do this one thing, you managed 10, you must not know what you're talking about. What else? What else about forecast is?
I think it should have freedom to change. So forecasting can change.
Yes, it does. So a forecast isn't written in stone, and also it's a best guess of what you might achieve. It's not a commitment, as you said. We'll come to commitment in a second. What else about forecast? Sorry, I'm labouring the point, but the point is the words, so I'm going to continue to labour the point. What else is it about forecasts that's positive? Okay, negative. Let's talk about negative parts of forecast. What could go wrong? What's bad about forecast? Sorry?
All of them are wrong.
All of them are wrong. And what does that look like to people? That means that either the situation I just said, you're under forecasting, or you're just consistently over forecasting and disappointing people all the time. Correct?
Is it kind of a get out of jail free card?
That's the one I was looking for, actually. So yes, now all of a sudden as a team member I go, hey, you know what, doesn't matter, it was only a forecast, let's go to the pub. What else?
So there's no commitment in the forecast.
There is no commitment in a forecast. That's the perfect segue. So let's talk about commitment now. That is true, and I think that you're implying something about commitment from a positive perspective. So what is good about the word commitment?
You are engaging yourself into doing something.
You are engaging yourself into doing something. I love that. More than that, though. Think broader than just yourself. You're working in a team. What else are you implying by the word commitment?
You're going to deliver value to your client.
Yes. From a team perspective,
You're committing to each other. So
you are committing to each other. Not even necessarily your bosses or the customer.
yeah.
You are committing to each other. What else is good about it?
I think you could probably plan more into your, that person's going to do that, so I can start doing something that's something.
Yes. So the trust comes into play.
Trust piece.
Yep. What about the bad parts of commitment? What does it imply if you make a commitment and then what could go wrong? From whom? Disappointment from whom?
From yourself, and then from
So you let yourself down.
and then team members.
You let the team down. Bosses as well, they tend to get pretty disappointed when you don't do what you say. Yes?
Program review, you are accountable for
Yes, there is accountability for something that you have committed to, and the negative side of that is either that you end up being held accountable, or you somehow manage to avoid accountability, both of which are bad things.
If your forecasts are not great and you end up missing your commitments frequently, the extra skin you get in having the road just loses value anyway. So it may as well not be there.
Yeah, the more times you miss a commitment, the less trust there is I think what I'm saying. Yeah. Excellent. All right. I don't have a hard and fast point of view on which is right, personally. That's not true. I actually do. But when I think about teams, teams should decide, because, and the point I'm going to try and get to through the rest of this discussion is, this is going to drive a behavior. So let's take commitment, for example. I and my team decide it's a sprint commitment, not a sprint forecast. So we sit down on Monday morning and we say we're going to do this work this week. It's going to be very echoey now. So they decide they're going to do this work this week, and they commit to each other. They're a team. They're all in this together. That's a great behavior. I love that behavior. That's what I want from a team. And in the middle of the week, somebody has a sick baby, something like that. The team's going to rally around to make the commitment, even though they've lost a team member. When it comes to overtime, Agile doesn't mean we work 9 to 5 and everything's great. It means we mess it up quite a lot, and we still need to do things like overtime. But now, you can, as a team, decide what your approach is to overtime. So we're going to do these 3 things that we're behind on, and then we're going to stop and we'll go home, so that we can meet our commitment. The single word choice drives a lot of conversation in the team, and a lot of behavior in the team, that you might think is implied, and actually isn't. And this is going to be, I'm going to keep repeating it, my point today, my entire point, which I probably could make in 1 sentence, is your words matter, and what you do with the words as a team matters. So we'll carry on. Alright, fail fast. Who's ever heard this? Fail fast. Who's ever done it? Delightful, isn't it? What a fun time. What's wrong with that choice of words?
You're setting yourself up for failure, aren't you? And accepting it.
You're accepting it. If the words, it's right there. We're going to fail. We know that right going in. We're going to just fail. We're just going to do it really quickly. What else? What other things are wrong with that? Why does that exist? What are you really trying to achieve? Let's try and get into that. Let's give it the words.
To not waste time, basically. If
Yep.
you fail, you better do it fast.
Yeah, don't waste time. So that means that if you realise something soon, stop doing it, right? So don't waste any of the additional time. That's good. That actually starts to get to what I think this really means. Okay, what else about fail fast?
well, it means in Agile teams means learn fast.
Nice. Learn. Let's work on that for a second. So what are you actually looking for when you're failing fast? It's something to do with learning, right? What is it to do with learning that you actually want to get to?
Learning whether what you want to achieve is actually possible.
Yes. But if that takes 2.5 years, is that a good thing?
No. You've got a lot of money, and otherwise
I love the answer depends. That is a depends answer, because your context matters, and we will come back to that. But generally speaking, I'd say 2.5 years, possibly too long. So I think it's about controlling the cost of learning, or managing the cost of learning. It's not about failing fast. Because if you fail fast, you can say, quality doesn't matter. It's going to fail anyway. We can just throw anything out of the door. Maybe, maybe not. But that's an implied state for your engineers to walk away with. If you say, look, it's going to fail fast. Versus, we want to manage the cost of our learning. Firstly, you're making it learning, not failing. And secondly, you're putting a boundary, a constraint on what we're trying to learn. Again, it's a simple choice of words. But without either, we could have had a discussion about failing fast and what that really means as well, by the way. It's not that that is bad inherently, it's just, it might not be the right choice. Alright. Metrics and diagnostics. Everyone likes a metric, don't they? I love metrics. Who here has metrics for what they do on a daily basis? Oh, come on, everyone's got metrics. Anyone studying, anyone doing work, everyone's got a metric. What happens when I measure you? What do you do? Let's just say I'm going to measure you on number of user stories that you write. What's going to happen?
It's going to generate more.
Yes. And are they going to be good?
There's no guarantee of that.
Probably not. So the thing with metrics is, you get what you measure. I always remember a favourite story of mine, and this is probably not true. The story of the exec that decided to incentivize developers and testers with the amount of bugs the testers found and the speed the developers could fix them. But guess what happened on a Sunday evening at the pub? The bug planning session happened. Hey, we're going to build this bug in here, you can find it tomorrow. Bonuses all around. So metrics are a really interesting thing, and when you think about a team, and you think about trying to improve and work together, I'm going to suggest metrics are the worst thing you can do. So I like to talk to teams about diagnostics. Who's ever taken a car to the garage because it runs a little bit funny? Do you know what they do when you do that? If it's a really bad garage, they just drive around the block and go, yeah, there's nothing wrong, mate. But if it's a good garage, they open the lid and they get the computer and the leads and they plug it in. And they run it for a while and it gives you some diagnostic measures. Who's driven home with one of those things attached to their car? No, me neither. So the choice by a team to say, we're going to talk about diagnostics now. We're going to talk about the things that are wrong, how we might measure them for a while, so that we can improve. Rather than, we're going to have a metric, and we need to meet that metric. Because the behaviour that comes from the language choice is very different. Subtly different, but very different. Making sense so far?
It's diagnostic, though, to find a problem, while metric is to measure, not necessarily a problem, but a measure of success or...
Good point. Glad you came. And
thank you.
I'm glad you asked me to clarify. So, many teams will use what is actually a diagnostic and call it a metric. And so this is a word choice issue, not a what is it issue. But the second you say, I'm going to measure you this way, you immediately imply something about what's going to happen to that person. So I'm going to measure you, I'll give you a great example. And some people in the audience will recognize this one. So it might be from my current company, or it might not be. So think about SLAs for fixing things. If your SLA for fixing things was public and sent to everybody in the company regularly with lots of red lines on it, if it didn't make sense to fix those things, would you still fix them? I'm going to say you probably would, because otherwise the CEO is going to ring you up and say, why are you the biggest line on the graph? That's the wrong behaviour. Now, the intent is great, and actually there's a bunch of things that you can do, that we are doing, specifically about one of our SLA-related things, to actually make it a better direction. But ultimately what you're doing by saying, we're going to fix this P7 bug within 6 weeks. Well, what if you've got 9 things that are much more important to the business? Are you going to go fix a P7 bug? Probably not. You're probably going to close it as won't fix. But we haven't got that behavior instilled in us because there's an SLA that goes to whoever, and everyone thinks, oh, I better fix this. So it's a good example of the kinds of things where metrics and diagnostics actually are really important to decide for your team and your organization which ones matter and are actual metrics, and then which ones are team improvement related things. Does that make sense? And again, yes, go on.
But doesn't by using metric, does it make it more efficient? For example, you set a target, so do you call it metric or diagnostic? Because I've been reading about Frederick Taylor and how he set target for his workers and he made it more efficient. So
that can happen, and everyone needs to know what they're aiming for, of course. My worry is that for a lot of things, you don't need the metric. So a metric for a business, KPI, is important. You need to know what you're aiming towards. But the thing that generally happens with metrics that are not well designed is, what I said is, people go around them, or they break them, or they do things deliberately to meet the metric, and they become noise, if you will. So metrics is really hard, and actually the more you read around the subject, the more you realize that you can have a really profoundly bad impact on a team by measuring too much. But measuring things to fix stuff, where your outcome isn't the metric, but the outcome, is really powerful. So again, so I'm bringing up these two different words and giving you a suggestion that you can take a look at the language you use and choose different language. Who's heard of velocity? This is a very agile term, so I might need to either skip or explain this one. Velocity is a number that a team gives itself that indicates its capacity for doing work. So it can be measured in bananas or oranges, it doesn't really matter, but a team says, like this time we did 5 bananas, last time we did 4 bananas, the time before that we did 6. We can probably manage about 5 bananas moving forwards. Velocity is a really interesting concept, and it's a really interesting, it's actually a metric sometimes. It shouldn't be, it should never be a metric. But it's a word choice that was, I think, poor, because when you say to a team, what's your velocity? You're essentially saying, how fast do you move, right? I mean, that's what the word velocity means. And sometimes managers say, well, this team over here has 4 bananas and that team has 6 bananas. That team must be worse than this one. When in fact, their bananas are different sizes. So we get into all sorts of trouble because way back when someone decided this one word, velocity, was a good measure for forward motion. And I'd actually say, maybe you should think about creation of value instead of velocity. Because how fast you go doesn't really matter as long as you're producing something of value. And then I'm going to skip over that one. It's my pet peeve. The amount of times I hear people refer to team members as resources, it changes the dynamic in the team. But what I want to do is just very quickly, I'd love to know if there are people in the audience that have words in their organizations or in the teams they work in that either work really well, that you all inherently know what that word means, or that collection of words mean. Or, alternatively, words that basically got completely hijacked over time and totally are bad words in your organization. Just take a moment to have a think about it. See what you want.
Efficiency,
Efficiency.
which
yes.
is meant to be promoting, obviously, a good behavior,
Yes.
but sometimes it can be misconstrued.
Right, so the word efficiency means doing something with the least amount of either effort or time or what have you. Well, I can make things more efficient by just skimping and not doing a good job and all those things. So yes, that's a great word. And actually I'd say effectiveness is a great word to start having a conversation about. So do we mean efficient or do we mean effective? Maybe both. But yeah, efficiency is a good one.
But if you look at words such as velocity, they're easier to measure than things such as effectiveness or value.
Excellent. I
So,
want to pause that one for a second. So, easy to measure versus difficult to measure. Since I'm not really talking too much about metrics specifically, but I will come back to that in a second. Remind me, because that's a really important point. But let's just finish up on other words for a second.
I think MVP gets a bit of it, right?
MVP. Minimum viable product. Everyone heard of that? So it's coming from, I guess, the lean startup world, but the idea there was to, again, we talked about it earlier, fail fast. It was the minimum amount you can do to prove the viability of your product. in an IT organization that's trying to ship, how many, 45,000 Windows laptops in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Simon works for a company that had a small security issue recently and had to rebuild the entire workforce's laptops from scratch. Minimum viable product has a different meaning in that context. And unfortunately, it also tends to now mean, pardon the French, crappiest thing you can put out the door. In fact, I think Jeff Patton specifically describes it as not the crappiest thing you can put out the door, so it's him that said that word, not me. Yeah, MVP is a good one, right? So what does that really mean? Somebody once said to me recently, that minimum sufficient to win would be a better phrase. Quite like that. Minimum sufficient to win. Just a little sentence. What are the words?
PDSA.
PDSA.
Plan, do, study, act.
Okay. I've heard of that PD, plan, do, check.
Yeah, PDCA, yeah, which is a schema.
The idea there is, I think it's a military term actually, but it's the idea of there's a cycle where you think about something, you do it, you then check it actually worked, and then you do something as a result. Actually, it's a diagnostic technique, it very much is. And so when you say that, is it a good thing or a bad thing in your organization?
For us, it's a good thing.
Okay, so everyone knows what it means, everyone has bought into that concept, and they behave in that way. Excellent, that's fabulous. Any other words that stand out?
Path of least resistance.
Path of least resistance. I assume that's a bad thing. Okay. Can you give an example of a path of least resistance?
Again, it's down to behaviour of like testing, design of a particular piece of service. They only ever test. They only ever consider either the positive side or
Right.
what would happen wrong.
Okay, so just skipping on the job, really.
Absolutely.
Path of least resistance. Otherwise
Test for
known as...
success, is it? Or is that similar to test for success? Or is it?
It's just...
It's the same, but it is, but from an architecture perspective, it can also be that, we won't do it the right way, which for enterprise architecture or business design.
Yep.
We'll just do this for... I've got a good example actually where I was in an architecture review board a couple of months ago, and we had a feed. I won't get too techy. We had a feed using queuing to get data out.
Too techy already.
And,
Cut them off.
the developers decided to go directly into a database. It was too hard.
Too hard. Brilliant. I like that one even better. Path of least resistance manifests itself as too hard. So the words that get used are too hard.
Yeah, it's really interesting because as a CEO, or thinking from a sales perspective, that means something completely different to me.
Path of least resistance. Yeah. What does it mean to you?
Well, it's if I'm going to get into a new marketplace, which competitors do I want to directly compete head to head with? Who am I, would I rather spend the money elsewhere, capture a certain amount of market rather than others? Very different perspective.
So for you, that would generate positive behaviours.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. That's awesome that we've got same word, different meanings.
It actually reminds me of a word in Chinese, which is ma fan, which is like too much effort. But they have one word for that.
Oh,
which
really?
is, like we use that in the office all the time.
It reminds me
it's
of
really
my-
bad, but
It reminds me of my teenage daughter, actually, when you ask her to do something, she goes, it's effort. One word, there's no effort.
Sense of it, because it's not from English. In English, it only has one very specific meaning.
Right.
When you say something like agile, it has 38 meanings.
Of course.
But when we borrow a word like Kaizen or something like that, we're using it in a very specific way, so it's much more difficult to dilute.
So that's interesting, and I want to move on to just to wrap up in a second. So Kaizen is a Japanese term, I think, that is to do with self-improvement. And your assertion there is it does have quite defined meaning, and therefore it's not that misunderstandable. Until you give it to non-native speakers, like us in the Agile world, and we say, hey, we should do this Kaizen thing, and we all go, yeah, we know what that means, and we completely ruin it for everybody. The people that do it well talk about it, understand what it means, internalize the essence and the behaviours, and then do it well. Great, thank you for your participation. I'm going to move on a little bit and just say one of the other things that you need to think about isn't just your vocabulary or your team's vocabulary that you talk about up front. You also need to listen to the team, because what you think is happening isn't, and you need to listen to the team. And one of the tribal leadership views of the world is around the language you use as an individual or as a team. So if there's a lot of I language in your team, you're probably pretty early on in the stage because you're very focused in on yourself. If there's a lot of we language, that means your team, your local team, is starting to really gel. But you might still be saying and then. There's we, But those people, they didn't do what we needed to do. And what you want to try and get to is language that includes a lot of us's. I know we and us are very similar, and poor word choice, ironically. But what you want to try and get to is make sure that the team is always talking in this sort of us collective environment. So it's not just talking, it's not just what you say, it's also what other people say, engage the team. So let's go back to my question at the beginning to wrap it up. I can't start if that puppy is just sad because he's not agile, or he just doesn't care. But the conversation we had at the lunch table ended up, I mean, I'd already gotten a long way along this thinking anyway. It helped me solidify what I'm about to share with you, which is 4 questions that I believe define agility. So that when someone says, are you agile? You can ask them these questions, or you can articulate these questions and say, this is how I know I am agile. And you can try and get on the same page. So, this is my sort of attempt at a takeaway that is more than just food for thought. So question number 1 that an agile person, team, organization must ask all the time is, what's the next most important thing to do? Hey, remember at the beginning I said this is going to be common sense. I wasn't kidding, this really is common sense. So, you have to ask what's the next most important thing to do. That drives behaviors, it drives tools, it drives practices. For example, what is a product backlog? It is a list of the next most important things to do. Changes, for sure, whatever. But the thing at the top of a product backlog should be that thing. Teams should respect that order. They should look at the list of most next important thing to do, and they should start at the top of it. And so now what you've got is an ability when a developer's a bit bored and they start on the thing that's 5th on the list because it's interesting and fun, you can say, look, as a team, we said we always focus on the next most important thing. Not the most valuable thing. Value's tricky because it could be brand value, it could be revenues, it could be cost savings. Value's hard. But everyone can comprehend and discuss the next most important thing we can do. At the end of the day, we exist purely to help our companies be successful. That's the only question we should ask. Make sense? So if you ask that question, the next question I'm going to ask you is, well, how do you know? And there are 2 parts to this. One is, when you say it's the most important thing, how do you know? And that's user research, years of experience. It's quantitative and qualitative data. It's an assertion of or a hypothesis that this thing will be valuable. This is the most next important thing. eBay's got a good one right now, which actually just launched. So guaranteed delivery. So as part of our approach to compete against Amazon, we decided we needed to put a lot of effort into figuring out delivery times. So next most important thing. Lots of people got behind it. It was great. But until people have it, until it's in their hands, as product folks, you need to go check that again and close the circle, because what you think is the next most important thing probably is, may or may not be. And you need to go back and double check. And so you need to do that test. Now, if you can do that, that's pretty awesome. You're always doing the most important thing for the business, right? That's cool. But it has to be good. And when I say high quality, it depends who you're talking to. This could be misconstrued as well. That could be tests, or it could be end-to-end user quality, the journey that your users take. And in fact, I think it's everything. And so again, an opportunity to have this conversation with your team, but at least at the highest level you're saying, what's important to me is that we do the most important thing and we do it well. Okay? That's a pretty high-performing team right there. If you work on a team that always did the most important thing as best as it could possibly be, that's a great place to be, right? I said 4 questions. And this is the most important one. Because if you can do that repeatedly, the other stuff, over and over and over again, you still aren't getting any more effective, or efficient, or better, or whatever. So the question that you need to ask yourself is, what's stopping me? What's the one thing today that's stopping me do this? I call it waste. There's different ways of thinking about it. But basically what you're trying to say is, so we're doing all this stuff and it takes us, however long, 2 weeks to get something out of the door. But we have a week of waiting time in the middle because the localization team take forever to do this thing. Okay, great, that's one thing that's stopping you. What's your next action? What's the next most important thing you could do? Well, it might be fix the localization. So you end up with a cycle where you're building the most important thing really, really well, and then saying, how can I do it better? That is what I mean when someone asks me, are you agile? And that is how I will describe my response. And change needs that simplicity. Oh, I've got to get rid of that word, because we know that there's 29 definitions of the word simplicity. Change needs a straightforward language that everyone understands and is discussed in order to work, in order to happen. And so these are just my views. You may have your own views. You may want to slightly play with those definitions. I'm not saying these are necessarily the right answers for everybody. However, I have kind of tested them a bunch of times with a bunch of teams and with a bunch of experts, just to see if they still kind of fit. And I'd be interested afterwards if people want to share stories in the Q&A or personally, if that resonates or if it doesn't. So let's wrap up. I started today kind of worried that coming and talking to a group of people about words was a bit simplistic. That is a valid use of the word simplistic on this occasion. Because, it seems like it should be straightforward. We all speak English, either as a first language or in some cases a second language, but we choose our words all the time, every day, every word we utter. I've chosen every word I have not scripted today. You'll give me feedback afterwards on whether they were good ones. But I saw 2 posts today in my LinkedIn feed, just this morning, that both made me think, I'm not the only person that's thinking about this, and I think it must be important. One was an HBR article, Harvard Business Review article from back in July, that said, "Stop saying change is hard." And there was a long article that talked a lot about how the human behaviour is wired towards more negativity than positivity, generally speaking. And if you use a word like hard, it's a self-fulfilling thing, and automatically people will head in that direction. And actually, it would be better to talk about change is effort. Change takes work. Change requires focus and can lead to good results. And you can change the words you use to set yourself up better for success. So that was the first thing I saw. The second thing I saw was a very short post by a guy called Al Shalloway, who is relatively well known in the Agile circles and certainly a prolific speaker. And he wrote a very short thing, which I think actually was I must have seen my deck, because it basically stole my idea. And he talked about clarity of terms. Now I talk about a bunch of other clarities, clarity of purpose, clarity of communications, that kind of thing. But this is the first time I've heard someone say clarity of terms. And he basically described this thing that I've just been talking about, where XP has this idea of working code, and Scrum has this idea of potentially shippable code. It kind of sounds similar, but are they? I don't know. If you're an XP person, which is an Agile practice, and I'm a Scrum person, when we say we're going to ship some software, do we mean the same thing? And he summarized it, and I'm going to read directly, I apologize. He said, "Someone guiding the way must understand the principles at the start and explain the practices in your context and with sensible terms." And I thought that really summarized what I've been trying to say here very well, which is, if you don't have clarity of the terms that you're using, you will talk past each other all the time, and you won't know it half the time. So start where you are. Go back to my 6 slides on the various Agile things. You can be an Agile team, you can be more efficient, effective, whatever. If you just take your current situation, maybe you're on a 12-month project and it's going down the toilet and it's horrible, you can ask, what's the next most important thing I can do? How can I do it well? And what's getting in my way? Right there and then, as an individual, as a team, you can change the language that you use with yourself in your context. That's super important. Start where you are. Then choose your words. So, commitment versus forecast. Don't just fall into it. We all ended up with commitment. That will do. Pick it. Decide upon it. Discuss it with the team. When you hear commitment, what does it mean to you? Almost have an artificial lift-off of some of the words that we're going to use to define the behaviours and the outcomes you're looking for. Listen to the team as well, not just in those conversations, but just listen from afar. Listen to the words that are happening around you. Are they using the same kinds of words that you're using? Because if they're not, I can guarantee you there's a mismatch between understanding, between what you think and what they think. And I'm speaking mostly as a leader there, but that applies to everybody that works on a team. And then boil it down to the most foundational thing that you can. So when I talk about agility, I actually have a slightly shorter version of those 3 questions, which is, we ship high-value software with high quality while systematically eliminating waste. That is my definition of being agile. And I can, and I will, repeat that often and over again, because it's simple, to the point, and is the foundation for a conversation. That's it. Questions, and I'll be happy to hear any feedback, because it's the first time I've done the talk, and I'd love to know how it resonates. But questions first. Albeit one of the 2. Yes?
I guess I have a question. I always find it really interesting to, when you said this is the first time you're giving this talk, how did you decide on the subjects you wanted to give a talk about? And if it was not your choice, what would you really like to give a talk about?
Oh, so I love the second question, the second half of the question more. Was it my choice? It was, and the reason I decided to focus on this specifically was that, I had done a bunch of presentations in the last 12 months really about Agile from a slightly higher viewpoint. And there's so much I could say. On every single one of these slides, I could have gone off down a path and talked about practices, how I've seen this in the real world. But the more I came to talking about these things, the more I realized that it kept coming back to this idea of being clear with your terms, clear with your words. So I actually did choose this, and I wanted to try and figure out if there was a talk about this that didn't try and be anything else, nothing to do with practices or agile or processes beyond that brief mention at the end. I wanted to get back to the very basics. And what would I want to talk about? I can talk about this all day, and I can expand any of this. So I'm happy talking about my experiences, but mostly I want to hear other people's, because having been in corporate life for so long, I'm like this all the time. I spend a lot of time outside trying to understand how other people are sort of working in the world. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, just one follow-up question. Because you spend a lot of time clarifying what Agile means and what it can mean to different people, well, how would you explain Agile in a few words to someone who's not at all familiar with the tech industry and the subject matter? How would you dense it down to someone, let's say for extraterrestrial life, who wants to know what is humans talking about Agile?
Well now, there's only one answer I can give you. I would have this conversation.
Interesting.
Because, as I said to you, this is my answer to the question, not to the question, are you agile? It is how I define the word agile in that question. So I would spend time, let me give you a completely different example. So you have a house, and you have 2 rooms downstairs, and one of them is in the back of the house, one of them is in the front of the house, and there's a door between them. So you can shut the back door, okay? Both rooms are horribly decorated. You've just moved in. And you have guests coming for a party, okay? You know inherently as human beings that you're going to decorate the front room and you're going to shut the door to the back room. You just know, right? Because you're going to focus on what's most important, and you're going to do a good job of it, and then you're going to focus in on only what you have time to do, right? So we do this every single day. And the reason I focus on these questions is because there almost isn't a scenario where you can't think, well, what's the most important thing for me to do? And how do I know? Sometimes you just know, right? And then how can I make sure I just do it as well as I can? Now let me give you the sort of the follow-on example for that last question. Oops, this one. So you do the front room, and when you do the skirting around the edge, you don't put any tape on the wall. It takes you ages because you're being really careful. When you do the back room, what are you going to do? Inherently, you just know you're going to go to the DIY store, you're going to buy the painter's tape, you're going to stick it on the wall, and then you're going to just do this with your brush, right? Because you've learned. And maybe you didn't say what's stopping me directly, but in your brain, inherently, you knew what was stopping you. So for me, I said at the top, common sense. Agility is about asking those very fundamental, easy questions, and they are easy questions to ask, and not necessarily to answer, to really focus in on what's the most important thing and how do you get it out, get it finished.
That's a brilliant answer, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, you had another question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, going off kind of what you were saying about corporate versus other organizations, how do you think some of these principles differ between, let's say, a small and a larger organization, or is there a difference?
Based on what I've said today, I feel like I'm not collaborating enough with the audience. I don't know, what do people think about that question? Is this different depending on the scale of your organization?
I don't think so. Sometimes I think you see the same things in larger organisations as well as in smaller organisations.
You do, but its interpretation completely changes. In the corporate side I worked in, completely different. The way we're doing Agile now, we're trying to adopt SAFe, which is hard and, funnily enough, and very complex way of scaling Agile to many big teams. I have about 60 in my team pretty much. And you compare to what I did before, how I transformed teams before, much easier. So I think to your question, smaller teams, they're a lot more adaptive. They're a lot more easy to adapt to almost changing life cycle, right? Whereas if you're in a bigger team, you've got people who are set in their ways completely, and it's really hard to try and convince them that this is a new way of working. And it's even harder in a company of 20,000 people like I am, where you're trying to transform a pocket, where you've got everyone else who's outside, who is completely running a waterfall-based approach. And very large 2-3 year programs, which typically never deliver. We've all been in large waterfall programs from a software development perspective, right? We've all lived in, for the techie guys in the room, we've always lived that. And how do you then manage and transform yourselves when you have all these external dependencies, which are, I need your plan for what's going to happen in 6 months, because that's when my Gantt chart tells me I need your piece of item money. Everywhere's different.
What's the organization?
Maersk, the shipping company.
So I want to bring it back to the question. So all valid points. This still works at every level.
Yes.
And the question leads to different answers. Remember, I said they're easy questions, they're not easy answers. So when Devin Wenig, the CEO of eBay, thinks about what the next most important thing to do is, he's probably making a promise to the street so that we can meet our revenue numbers, or we can meet our expectations as shareholders. But he's still asking that question, essentially, not what's stopping you, but what's the next most important thing? And I think it has transpired over time that one of the challenges is the translation of strategic answers to these questions, and then the lower level implementation is a problem. I'm actually involved with an organization called Brightline right now, which is trying to raise awareness of that very question, and they just did an economist research study that you can go and download from brightline.org, and the research study talks to a whole ton of CXO level people about what goes wrong when you try and turn strategy into execution. And it's everything you would imagine it to be, right? So there's just all sorts of problems with communications, with inflexible strategies, with these 2 to 3 year programs. So it's an interesting read, and when you apply these questions to the world, you can start to think about ways you might combat that, both as an individual, as a team member, but then as an organization as well. I'm not saying these are the right, only answer. There's so much more to teamwork. There's, the human factor is involved, those kinds of things. I'm answering very much the question, what does it mean to be agile? What does it take to be agile? What kinds of people, what kinds of practices, what kinds of personalities? That's a whole, we can do that one next time. But this one's really just about what does it take, what does it mean to be agile?
I think some of the challenges as well is you could have agile teams in organisations that are not agile.
Yes.
And sometimes you do have conflict there.
Absolutely.
Organisations that are quite strict in the way they work, so you have external dependencies, you have teams that have to approve things, you have toll gates to get things completed, but you have teams that are trying to run agile, but the organisation itself in terms of their culture, which are not agile, you then have a conflict there.
And I think that you can use some of these questions in those interactions. So what's stopping you is a good one then. So if you have, say, some process gate that you have to go through. So what would you do about that as a team? Well, okay, let's quantify how much time we do spend on this every time it happens. Let's just keep notes. And then after 6 months, let's just go and say, do you realize you spent one developer's time for 4 months of this 6 month period doing nothing but this gate? It's a great conversation to have. And you're empowered to ask those questions. And this is the thing, is everybody can be agile on their own. They may still be frustrated. I'm not going to lie to you. This is a frustrating world to live in, particularly when it's hybrid. But I'm trying to give the sort of right questions to be asking that you can then go and have good conversations. It's all about words, remember. And if you just say, well, our product backlog says this, blah, 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 the folks are just going to go, oh, it's jargon, I don't care. But if you just say, well, what's stopping you doing this? How can I help? You know, this seems important to me. Does it seem important to you? You can start to have much more human conversations, human-level conversations, rather than dependency management and risk aversion and all of that kind of stuff. So again, it comes down to interactions and words.
Perhaps.
Do you think there's a project that Agile just wouldn't work?
Again, we're going to start branching out. So fundamentally, no. I do not believe there is a project that wouldn't work with Agile. It doesn't mean you can't do it other ways. Let's pick one, though, that's perhaps a good example. Building a car. You know, you might think you need to do a bunch of design up front before you go build a car. There was actually a team out of Seattle under a guy called Joe Justice, which, by the way, is one of my favourite names ever. And they built a car in an agile way. And did it very successfully. It was a high-performance car. It was really awesome. And they proved that, you know, even though common sense says you can, or you shouldn't, you know, there are ways of doing it. The question is really more about what your constraints are. So an example might be, if you're building an aeroplane, you don't want to ship sprint 1, turn left, and then sprint 2, turn right. Probably not a good idea. And so what Agile means, how long that is between shipments, might change for your context. And remember I said start where you are. So if it doesn't make sense to ship something for 6 months, that doesn't mean the only time you test your software is the day before 6 months is up. You can test it together from day one. So even though you have a longer time period, you can do more agile thinking. You can ask more of these questions and be more successful. Because this leads to better decisions. It leads to the ability to change your mind and have trusted conversations. Make sense? So I fundamentally believe that almost any problem to be solved can be solved in an incremental way and should be because you learn from it.
So I work in a consultancy environment, so we attempt to deliver software, but as part of consultancy afterwards, so we have our own challenges in the fact that we can't be truly agile, because we have to commit to what we're delivering in a certain time frame with a certain number of resources which may or may not flex. So there's, I don't know if you have any experience of that or recommendations in that space.
I do have experience of that. You probably won't like my recommendation, but I'm going to use another analogy. So think about where you live and the cost of where you live and the closeness to your office. You can only have two of those three things in a positive way. You can live close to the office and cheap. It's going to be tough. You can live miles from the office and cheap. You can only have two of those things. It's physical. So when you're being told, here's the scope and here's the date, guess what? What's the third item on the triangle? Nope. Cost is in the middle. You can play with cost a bit. You can throw people at it. What's the third? Quality. Because if you tell me what you want and when you want it, I will tell you how good I will make it. If you tell me you want your front room painted 3 hours from today, or 3 hours from now, I'm just going to do this with a paintbrush. So, unfortunately, the fact is, you're basically trying to correct for an impossibility from a physics perspective. Now, you can start to ask these questions and you can start to say, what's the most important thing we can do on this project? And can we show that to the customer really, really quickly? Because when they see it, they're going to go, well, that thing we thought we wanted, I'm not sure. Can we have a conversation about that? And what you do over time is you build the ability to have a conversation into the mix. And what you'll end up building is something different. And you'll still do it in the same time frame. It's just the scope will naturally change. And it will still be a better product. So you have to just stop trying to open all of the tasks at once and hope that they all get finished by the end. Focus on that one most important thing. Do it. Show it to somebody. Have a conversation.
It's not the way you're engaging, isn't it? Maybe
well, I mean, obviously there are, again, trade-offs with all of that. But it it is, there is also a level of, with the organisation you're working with, how open they are to Agile. And as you say, in an ideal situation, you would go in, you would iterate through, you would show, and you would have the flexibility to do that. But whether you do contractually have that flexibility.
So those two things should be decoupled from each other. So the contract will say something, and that's fine, and it's probably going to say something about time, probably money. It's going to pretend to talk about features, but at the end of the day, they're either going to get something low quality, or they're going to get a different set of features. Or you're going to be lucky and you guessed it just right, and it's going to be perfect. Never seen that happen. The one thing I'd say is, it could. The one thing I would point to is, I haven't used the word agile once in those 4 questions. Anyone can ask those 4 questions of anybody at any time, and not once use jargon, agile, whatever. You just simply appeal to common sense. Well, what if I just did this thing? We're not, I'd like to prove to you that this user experience actually is potentially not the right user experience, or potentially that it is, right? Or I have this idea and I just threw together a mock-up. Has anyone seen the video of, I think it's IDEO, the company IDEO, that do they were doing some research on an Elmo Sesame Street iPhone game. And what they basically did was they got a massive cutout of an iPhone, and they had one of the guys put on a mask and pretend to be on, and they showed that video to a bunch of kids. They didn't build a single line of software. They just cut out a big piece of cardboard and had a guy in the office be stupid. And they proved really quickly that actually kids loved it because they didn't know it. And so think about that. How can you have a conversation with your client, irrespective of the contract? And sometimes that's going to be hard. It really is. Okay, cool. Anything else on words before we wrap?
We have time for maybe one last question.
Thanks.
Not exactly words, but in your experience, how long does it take to get a team that doesn't understand Agile to become Agile?
Great question. I'm going to point you on my questions. How often do they ask that question by themselves? These questions by themselves. At the point they ask those questions, I would suggest you have an Agile team. Whether or not they have a backlog, or a product owner, or any of the other things on those slides from before. And again, I want to be clear about, there's a difference between philosophically, how do we think about being Agile, and the practices of Agile. So I can have a team be Agile tomorrow with the practices, by just saying, we'll have a backlog, we'll have a product owner, we'll have blah, blah, blah. They will not be Agile. And over time, that will go really quickly. You can take a team that is doing a 2.5-year project, and you can make them more Agile than they were today, just by keeping asking those questions. And what will happen over time is they'll ask them for themselves, and they will start to solve their own problems. And eventually they will be Agile. It's the difference between doing and being. Remember I said that earlier? So I hope that makes sense.
It does, but it still doesn't give me an idea of how long. So, for example, the previous company I worked for, they were trying to implement Agile. It took 1.5 years. They hadn't quite achieved it, but obviously when you're talking to management, they'll be like, so what is the time frame? When will I see results, kind of thing? That's pretty much the question. You kind of want to actually kind of know and actually the expectations and actually be able to, not necessarily give guarantees, but actually give an indication.
So what's the first question I would ask, the first language specific, since this is about words, is compared to what? So when they say, well, will we be done? You're starting somewhere, and they have an expectation of what the finish line looks like. You have to have that conversation, because otherwise you can't answer the question. And if the expectation is that everyone has a product backlog, tomorrow, we can be done tomorrow. If the question is, when will all of the teams be working in a way where they're always working on the most important thing, it's always high quality, and they systematically look for issues, that's a different question. So, I'm not trying to avoid your question. There is no specific answer to the question. Only, what do you do differently? And so, the first question I would ask an executive system is, when will we be finished? Is with what? And on that very cryptic note, I'm happy to share more thoughts about that as we finish, but I feel like we should wrap the questions. I'm happy to continue that conversation if people would like.
Yeah, we'll have a short amount of time at the end, but we'll just start wrapping up there, if that's okay. So everyone, can we have another massive round of applause? I hope you found that talk insightful. Before we wrap up, we usually do, this is a PTC event, we do this at every event, we do shout outs for about 5 minutes, which is when we basically call people up on stage and give you an opportunity to share with the audience, whether it's an ask or something you want to tell them about, anything, it could be anything. So I always usually give an example. So for instance, I'm working on a startup of mine, so as a shout out I could say, we've launched our app and I'd like you guys to go to the App Store, the Google Play Store, and check out our app, which is called Showcased. So that's an example of a shout out. So if anyone has something like that, we're going to use some time to think now about shout outs. Come on up.
So if you haven't met me already, Matthew Black, I'm the CEO of an online television company called Startup V. You can find it at startupv.tv. And at the next business show, 15th, 16th of next month, I think it is.
Yes.
We'll be having a big stand and we'll be actually doing live interviews. People can come up to the stand and we'll have a camera team there and you can pitch your business idea and who you are. And we're going to, the winner of that day, or those 2 days, we're going to put on with another 4 startups on a reality TV show we'll be filming over the next 3 months. And each participant, we're spending about £25,000 in production values. We're going to be airing it, we're going to be pitching it to the BBC. Anybody wants to start a startup with the idea that maybe 20, 30 million people know who you are and want to buy your product, that's a pretty good startup. So that's an opportunity for you to interact and come and see me if you want to know more.
Thank you, Matthew. Yes, come on up.
Hi, my name is Julia O'Toole, and so we are a development company. We do software, and we also have an agency. I'm going to talk about one of the products that we built, which is Rosy Boa. It's a collaboration tool, so it allows you to actually talk, have a conversation directly on the task. So instead of having Slack and Trello and Evernote and trying to find all of the files that the repository of the company, you can actually keep everything in one thread. So it's called Rosy Boa. If you're interested in being a company that tries it as a pilot, we haven't launched it yet, but you can come and see me and I'll sign you up. Thank you.
Do we have one more? Okay. All right, well, the people who came to give shout outs, if you just come up, we normally have giveaways for you, so if you just grab me later, we have giveaways for the people.
No, I want to do a shout out.
All right, I'll let you go.
No, I wasn't.
Are you sure? You're welcome to.
I was interested in the giveaway.
Well, you're welcome to come at the next event and do a shout out there. So now that you've learned. So that's it, guys. We're going to wrap up there. For people who are interested in following up, some people ask about slides, etc. We're going to post a video of the event on our website, www.products.count. And if you found this great, then we usually send around emails asking for feedback. That's one of the things we really value. We always send feedback back to our speakers, so please do fill out that form. And come to our next event. It's going to be on the 15th of November, and we have Chad Jennings from Move, the creative business cards company. They do lots of other things. So yeah, so please come to that, and thank you so much for coming.